Welcome to State of Wellbeing, a podcast from South Dakota State University. The State of Wellbeing is a holistic well-being podcast with the goal of supporting the campus community as we strive to be a growing, high-performing, and healthy university. Hello, welcome back to State of Wellbeing. I'm Caitlin Walters, the Wellbeing Specialist, and this week we're starting off our financial wellness series. Joining me today is
Hi, I'm Lorna Saboe-Wounded Head. I work for SDSU Extension. My title is Family Resource Management Field Specialist, and I primarily do personal finance programming for all ages. SDSU Extension is a community-based program, and so I'm working with everybody in the state of South Dakota. I'm also an accredited financial counselor, and so I conduct one-on-one financial counseling sessions for anyone who just needs a little bit of assistance with their financial management or might be dealing with some kind of a financial issue.
That's wonderful. So it seems like you have a lot of experience working with folks and working on their financial wellness.
Yeah, I love working with people. I like the education piece, but then also just talking individually with everyone because we all have different ways of managing our finances and different issues. And so one-on-one is always the best way to get kind of to the root of the issue and focus on what needs to change.
What got you first interested in working more with folks and working on financial wellness?
I would say it was maybe just a personal interest initially. I started my professional career as a family consumer sciences middle school teacher, worked at the high school level, and really enjoyed teaching the classes on budgeting and financial management. And then as I continued in my educational pursuits, I decided to start specializing in the family financial planning. And I really see finances can create so much stress and anxiety for people. There is education for individuals on there to learn more about their finances, but a lot of the times we don't seek out the advice until we are in the situation. So by taking a financial education course or workshop or going to a program, the topic may not be something that someone really needs at that time, but they might need it a little bit later. So I think that we're constantly evolving and we're continually maybe needing some assistance and some resources with our finances. And so I guess I'm just passionate about helping people become financially secure.
I like that. And I think what you said about, maybe it not being something that they feel they need to worry about right in that moment, but you can always take classes. I just remember always hearing, you're never too young to start planning for your future, especially when it comes to retirement and all of that. So I
Mhm.
guess to kind of kick it off, why would you say budgeting is important for students and how can that impact their financial future?
Is really your really just core basic financial skill that everyone needs to have. We all budget in different ways. It's just I When I describe budgeting, I say it's really just figuring out how to allocate your income and to your expenses that you have. Uh, Starting to develop your budgeting skills and your budgeting style early is going to help you with your financial security throughout the rest of your life. If you can start figuring out kind of how you like to manage your finances, what's the best strategy, if it's paper pencil keeping track, if it's using an app. I discourage people from saying I budget in my head because it's hard to really truly keep track of your spending, and it's much easier and much more realistic to like write things down. And when I say write things down, I don't necessarily need paper and pencil. So many apps out there that are wonderful and are very effective with managing our finances and being able to track things. But even I can, spend throughout the week, get to the end of the week, look at my spending, and realize I've forgotten something, and realize that my balance is not quite what I thought it was going to be. So, being able to learn how to budget and practice budgeting and get in the habit of budgeting earlier is always better. The other thing with college students is the most of us or most college students are borrowing money for their education. And the more money you borrow today, the impact it's going to have on your future income. So, thinking about you're graduating, you have that first paycheck coming in, but you also have that financial aid or that financial loan that you need to start paying. Depending on the amount of money you've borrowed and the size of that payment, it's going to impact your housing, maybe the kind of car you're going to be able to drive, the some of the other entertainment, and some of the other spending that you're going to be able to have. So, really, just being aware of your finances as a college student is going to set you off in a much better position once you graduate.
Yeah, I was in college in, the early 2010s, and I don't feel like I ever was really taught, like, this is what it's gonna look like when you have to pay these student loans back, and so, I was like, "Oh, this is great. I took a photography class and decided to buy a really nice photography camera with some of those student loans because I needed it for my class." And, now it's like, you're looking back and you're like, "Oh, well, I could have been a little smarter about like how much I was accepting for my student loans." And I think that that was something certainly that I wish that I'd heard when I was in college for sure.
Mhm, mhm. One thing to keep in mind when it comes to, just thinking about your financial well-being is if you have made a decision to purchase something that maybe wasn't the best option, so like the camera, although that might have been a good investment depending on what your future endeavors are, is to learn from that and don't think, "Oh, I've messed up my finances for the rest of my life." It's just, you know what? I learned from that I probably maybe didn't need to necessarily buy that camera or take that class. Uh, but maybe there's, some positives that came out of it too. So, uh, I always encourage people to learn from their past habits, their past actions related to their finances, and not feel bad about it, because then it's hard to maybe look at your financial management in a different perspective if you're feeling bad about all the things that you've already done.
I think that's such a great point too, because I think, and you often hear this when it comes to scams, but that like shame has a
Mhm,
lot to do with how we maybe avoid dealing with our financial situations. When we hear about like people who got stuck in scams, they don't tell
mhm,
anyone and they don't address it properly because there's a lot of shame behind it. They're embarrassed. And I kind of wonder if that same thing can go with, like I did always feel a little bit of shame of like, man, I really shouldn't have bought that. I mean, I used it, I still have it, but like there was always some like shame. And I love the like positive, like what can you
mhm,
learn from that? And what could you, take and adjust in the future with that?
mhm. Absolutely. So that's why I have continued to be a financial counselor, is to be able to just talk with people about that shame that they might be feeling. And, we've all made financial mistakes. Some are more expensive than others. And if if someone has graduated from college and their student loan debt is completely overwhelming, then find someone to talk to who has the credentials to be able to objectively help you. Eh, Financial counselors are one. I know there's others on campus that can sit down and talk with people, but take that, what you've done, and work with it, and don't let it continue to impact your financial security for much longer period of time. So,
So you talked a little bit about creating a budget, and I think sometimes when I'm talking about financial wellness with students, when I get to like that budgeting piece, there's almost a little bit of like, well, that's really hard for me when I'm not I don't have an income, or I have a very limited income, or maybe an irregular income. What can students do to create a realistic budget when they have a limited income?
the first thing to do is really just pay attention to what are your expenses. And so if you're, starting out today and you decide, you know what, after I listen to this podcast, I'm going to get this figured out. Start by looking at your, say, past months or even 2 weeks expenses, look at what bills you have to pay. So if you're paying your cell phone bill, if you have subscriptions that you're paying for, if any car maintenance, expenses for your car, what you've spent on like food for groceries, food going out to eat, entertainment, and things like that. Just look at what you did over the past month. And then as we are tracking our spending, categorize those so what you're spending in each of those different categories. There's budget templates online that you can use to kind of help you get started, or if you're using a specific app that has a budgeting tool on it, then just fill in the information there. And that's kind of your starting point for figuring out what that budget can look like for the next month. The thing is with that is pay attention to if you have borrowed money in order to cover those expenses over the past month. So when I say borrowed, did you pull from savings? Did you use a credit card? Did you have ask borrow money from a person or family member or something like that? Because that is, if you're consistently going to be able to borrow that money from family, then that can be a part of your income. But if it's kind of like I borrowed it because I needed it to get through the month, then that's where you really want to pay attention to how much money you actually have to spend. With budgets, we want our income to equal our expenses. If our income is not equaling our expenses and the expenses we have are necessities, like we need to pay for this stuff throughout the month, then you have to start looking at increasing your income or decreasing your expenses. So as a college student, ways to increase your income is to earn more money if you have a job, or you could take out more student loans if you need to, or see if you can borrow a lump sum from a family member. Now, I don't like in terms of earning more money in a job, there's a kind of a sweet balance between working too many hours and managing your academics. So you have to be able to find that. Um, and then, borrowing money, sometimes that's not possible. I discourage you from using credit cards to cover that gap, because unless there's going to be an influx of money or, an increase in income, it's going to, that spending is going to impact your future income. When you're looking at your expenses, be realistic about, what is there something that you're paying for that you could cut? So that's always the first place. So, an easy place I know for me is subscription services. If you have multiple entertainment services that use occasionally, maybe look and see like which ones could you go without for the rest of the semester. And same with any other subscriptions you might pay. A lot of those subscriptions are like $10 or less, but that can add up after a while. And then look at your flexible spending. Look at how much gas you're putting in your car. And are you driving or using your car a lot because, you're just kind of tootling around and taking road trips or whatever? Think about maybe scaling back on that. If you're only using your car to get to work or to get to family, that's probably not a place to cut. Look at what you're spending on food first, the going out to eat food. Do you have maybe some kind of a habit, like a coffee habit? I know that's an example I can easily explain because I have a coffee habit. And do look at how much you're spending, and is there a way to scale back? So maybe cut out one or two of those little of coffee trips instead of, going cold turkey. Same with going out to eat. Are you kind of grabbing and going lunches um, to get from class to class? Maybe you could figure out a way, spend a little bit of extra time packing a lunch, because buying food and packing a lunch is always going to be less expensive than the purchasing at a ready-made. So that probably sounds like a lot, and it probably sounds like a little overwhelming, but just kind of start slow, look at it. It's so much more stressful to get halfway through the month and not have money to pay for those necessities than it is to spend some time truly evaluating what your current situation is. And always keep in mind that it's like with college students, I always, you work in these time frames like fall semester, spring semester, summer. And so if you're just, okay, this spring semester, this is what I need to do in order to get to the end. And then over the summer, your situation is going to change. Your expenses are probably going to change. Your income is probably going to change. And so you want to do the same kind of review or look back over the summer too. So, did I answer your question? I kind of maybe
Yeah.
went off the rails a little bit.
No, no. And I think you talked about a few of them, but are there any other common mistakes that you see students making when they're starting out with budgeting?
I would say the biggest mistake is really just truly not paying attention to your spending and maybe just kind of going with the flow. Well, this is, doing the same thing all your friends are doing. And everybody has a different financial situation. So I don't know how much my friends have to spend. I just know how much I have to spend. Another thing I think is not really paying attention or thinking about those unexpected expenses that might come up. So, you gave a good example of needing to buy a camera for a photography class. A lot of times we don't know maybe what some of those expenses for a class are going to be until we get into the class. And if we're not, maybe setting aside money for that or kind of keeping in the back of our mind that I need to scale back on my spending until I know exactly what my class expenses are going to be. The other thing is just those kind of unexpected emergencies, like maybe your car breaks down, maybe you drop your phone and it shatters, and we all know having our phone is very important, and you have to get a new one or get a replacement, or even your laptop or your computer. Those are all really important pieces of equipment that you need to have as a college student, and they can be really expensive repairs. So always maybe not no, s- always have a little bit of a backup in terms of your finances. So I would say that's probably the biggest mistake is just, and it's really even as an adult in the professional world, there's expenses that come up every month that it's like, oh God, I never even thought that that would happen, and it can kind of derail that budget. But if you're paying attention to your spending, then you can make adjustments and feel a little bit more in control of your finances.
I grew up in the time when we had to like paper and write down when we had to balance a checkbook, and I feel like, at a certain point, we stopped using checks. I barely see them anymore. And so I think that is really important that like when you said like don't keep the balance in your head, I was like, "Ooh, I am not very good about writing it down," because when that went away, I never like adapted to using an app. It was kind of just like I would check my online banking. But are there any like really great apps that you feel, or any I know you said you can do paper and pen as well.
Uh-huh.
Any other great ways you feel this people can use to track their budgets?
Yeah. A lot of times, like your bank is going to have an app, and you can track that way. Sometimes they're set up so that they categorize your expenses. Um, there's some other apps that have a fee associated with them depending on how you use them. Some are limited and um, without a fee. I don't want to encourage anyone to spend money to manage their finances. I don't really like doing that. I would say there's one that I use, and it does have a fee associated with it, and it's called Cube. QUBE, just like a cube. And it helps you to really categorize your spending and know how much you're spending in each of the different cubes. So essentially, you set it up where you have cubes for your spending. So like food, transportation, um, entertainment, clothes, whatever, and you essentially set up your budget so that you can, um, you allocate a certain amount of money. What's nice about it is that you link it to your bank account and then actually have funds transferred to this cube account. It's very secure. There's a specific debit card with it. And so whenever you spend, so I go to the grocery store, buy my groceries at Hy-Vee, that and use my Cube card, then it essentially deducts the amount of money I've spent for my groceries. And so then I can keep track of exactly how much I'm spending for the different categories. You can move things around. Like, let's say I overspent on groceries, but I haven't spent as much on transportation. I can just, shuffle more money into that cube. That's one good um, app to use. There's another one that's called YNAB. You need a budget is what it stands
Mm.
for, and it just helps you to set up a budget and then to be able to track that. Um, Different types of apps, just like people are going to fit better than others. I would encourage you know, looking for just doing a search for best financial apps and trying out the free versions of them to see how they work for you. If you just really need to be able to keep track of that flexible spending, then that might be a different app than another one where you really need to keep track of all those fixed expenses and savings and those types of things. But start with your bank app first and see if there's something on there that would work because you already have access to that, and then search for some of those others.
I like that. So we talked a little bit about budgeting. I wanted to talk about saving and investing. So how much should students try to be saving each month? And that can be students or honestly, we do have faculty and staff that listen to this as
Mhm.
well. How much should we be saving each month? And how can we build up that emergency fund?
Okay. So, depending on who you talk to and maybe where you are in your life cycle stage, um, it the general rule of thumb the financial advisors will tell you is to save like 6 to 12 months of your discretion or non-discretionary expenses. So those bills that absolutely have to get paid. So let's say you lost your job and what are the bills that you're still going to have to pay when you don't have any income coming in and you want to figure out, what would be 6 to 12 months of that. Can be a really big number for some people, so that might be a little bit overwhelming to start out with. So another good method is 3 months. To start with the goal of saving 3 months. If that seems overwhelming, 1 month even. At a minimum, something needs to be set aside. So there have been research studies that have been conducted on whether or not, like how many people could manage a $400 to $500 unexpected expense. And unfortunately, the percentage is pretty low of people who could actually handle that. So for college students, I recommend that $400 to $500 amount. And because I think, like, let's say, you need a laptop repair, car repair, phone replacement, or anything like that. Um, that $400 to $500 might not cover that expense, but it's going to address it and maybe you're going to have to come find some money someplace else. But a $400 to $500 hit on your monthly budget is going to create a lot of stress and anxiety. But if maybe you only have a couple hundred that you have to come up with because you have that savings, it's going to be a little bit easier to deal with. So, how to get started? The best way to save is to automate your savings. And so, set a goal. Like, my goal is to save $400 in my emergency savings. And emergency savings is that savings that you use strictly for those emergencies and unexpected expenses. It's not what you use when, your friends are like, "Hey, there's this great concert. We're going to go to that." And, you know, entertainment and that kind of thing. It's strictly for emergencies. So start by automating. So if I'm going to save $400 a month and I look at my budget and I actually all I can spare is maybe $10 a month. Automate $10 every paycheck or a specific time in the month, have it set up so $10 automatically goes to my savings account. Granted, that's going to be slow process, but it's something. It's getting you started. And then if kind of set a goal, you want to save that amount any extra money that comes in, maybe you get to work a couple extra hours at your job, decide that money's going into my savings. Or maybe you get a tax refund, just put that money into savings. Or maybe you get some gifts for Christmas, um, put that money into savings. And so if you're real intentional about it, before you know it, you're going to be able to build up to that $400 amount. It's going to probably take a few months if you don't have something, but it's a start. And then once you get to that, look at your continue to do that automatic savings, and eventually it's going to start to build up a little bit higher. As your income changes, you're going to be able to save a little bit more. But that's the best way to start. As we look at our spending, it's like, oh, I don't have any extra money at the end of the month. Make sure you set this automatic savings for the beginning of the month or whenever you get paid, so that you're not taking what you think you're going to have left over into savings, but what you truly have. After a while, you won't even notice that you're putting that money in savings because it's not a part of your expenses.
And I think you've already talked about it a little bit, but I think, just a couple of other like simple, easy ways to cut expenses. And I think, you mentioned just being really aware of like, and even just like being critical of what we're like subscriptions that we're paying for. I was talking to someone the other day who had found out that they had been paying for a subscription to a website service that they hadn't used, and they've been paying for it for almost 10 years.
Oh my gosh,
And,
10 years.
yeah, and it wasn't super expensive each month, but they were certainly still paying it. I think, some of those subscriptions, if we're not paying attention to it, they like you said, they do certainly add up. I also think when it comes to, like, trying to reduce, just that, like, extra spending, this is maybe an extreme step, but, I recently took a month off from social media, and I just, like, deleted the apps from my phone. And I found I saved so much money because I wasn't getting hit with these ads all the time that are like, "Oh, like, look at these cute shoes," or "Look at these cute pants." And even though, like, I would think, "Oh, I'm not really buying every single ad I see," but certainly when I see some ads, it like triggers something in my mind and I'm like, I do actually need this, and this. And so I think when we like stop seeing them so frequently, we're a little bit less tempted to like spend the money. And I don't know if you have any other like tips or anything that you like to do when you're trying to cut things out.
That's a really good idea. I'd never thought of that. And if you know you're someone who gets triggered or to purchase those things. Another method is to not save your credit card or your bank account information on different shopping sites. So I'm going to use Amazon as an example. If you don't save that card on that account, then you have to physically go get the card, type in the information, and it's not going to be maybe as easy or as impulsive to make that purchase. I know, every site we go to that where you buy something, you can save your information, and I don't, and it does take a little bit of time to add that, but then it also gives you that time to think about it. Another thing to do is, there's nothing wrong with browsing and putting stuff in your shopping cart and then just giving yourself some time a day. I recommend like 24 hours to think about it and then go back to it. And don't, like, I was shopping for something or looking at something yesterday and I put it in the cart and I was like, I don't know if I really want to get that or not. It was for a Christmas present. And I got the email that said, "Oh, looks like you still have something in your cart." And so, but I just deleted it because it's like, yeah, I decided I didn't want to get that. So kind of think about making it a little bit harder to buy, to shop. Another thing, if you say you're going out with friends, take cash because that's really going to limit the amount that you're going to be able to spend. It's so easy to just, swipe that card again or uh, just add something else to it instead of just thinking, okay, I only have this much money in my wallet to be able to spend. So, you
Yeah,
know,
and when I'm done with that, I'm done.
yeah, just, I mean, give yourself some limitations, you know, play games with yourself essentially. Like, I love the idea of you cutting off social media. Uh, because especially if that is, a trigger for you to do some shopping or to see different ads or to look up some different things. So, yeah, those are good ideas.
So we talked a little bit about saving. I want to talk a little bit about investing. Can you tell us maybe what's the difference in saving and investing? And then when should we start
Okay.
investing?
So saving is just that act of putting money someplace safe that you can use for emergencies or short-term goals. So say a savings account, online savings account, bank account. It doesn't matter what kind of account it is, but it's one that's liquid that you can get to pretty easily if you need it. Investing is where you're essentially purchasing some securities. So either a stock, a bond, or the combination mutual fund that has a potential for a higher return than a savings account is going to have. And it's usually for long term goals. You don't want to put money in an investment that you think you're going to be need to use within like 6 months or a year. So, if you're saving for college and if you're going to college next year, then you'd put that into a savings account. You wouldn't put that into an investment account. So that's kind of the big difference. Probably the thing that young adults should be thinking about is saving for retirement, which yes, I know that that's like 40 to 50 years away, and so it's hard to wrap our head around it. Uh, but studies have shown that if you save $100 a month starting at the age of 18, you only have to save until you're about 35 to have that $1 million saved. And then after that, you don't really have to save anymore because it just grows through that those returns that are reinvested. Now, $100 might seem a lot. You can start a Roth IRA or an IRA with as little as $50, and you can do that by investing in mutual funds. And that $50 can be automatically deducted from your account and to start that investment. And kind of, you set it and forget it type of a thing. With college students, make sure that you actually have that $50 that you can save that you don't need to have for your general expenses. So if it's possible for to start saving early when you're in college or right out of high school, that's the best time to start saving for investing and retirement planning. Then once you are out of college, you have that professional job. If you have an employer sponsored retirement plan, immediately get involved with that. Some you have to opt into, some are automatic. If there's a match for that where your employer matches part of your contribution, take advantage of that. And it may not seem like much. Say there's only a 1% match by the employer. It's like, well, that doesn't really seem like it's worth my time. But just always remember that that's going to add up. And the more you can put into that account earlier, then the better off you're going to be as you get older and more advanced. Plus, your income is most likely going to increase, and you know it's always a more positive outlook. So, for college students, like before you start to invest, make sure you have the money to be able to do that so you are able to meet your basic needs on a monthly basis, pay those bills, feel like, you are getting the food that you need, that you have a decent housing, you have decent transportation, and you're just feeling like you're able to meet those basic needs. And then anything extra can possibly go into investing. Remember, with investing, that's for the long term. So you don't want to put money in there that you want to withdraw within a year. Once you're a professional and same kind of thing, make sure you're getting your basic needs met. And if, with debt is managed, you have decent transportation, decent housing, and those types of things. And then, start saving for the kind of the most important things, like in terms of prioritizing. If you want to purchase a house, or you want to upgrade your car, or you want to go to graduate school, look at those kind of things. Some of those longer term goals, the traveling or starting a business or some of those different things, you have to prioritize. Everybody's different. But you might have to wait to pay to start saving for those in order to get those kind of essential needs met.
I think that's a great place to start when we start thinking about investing. And I think too, like thinking about when you're looking at jobs coming out of college, are like you mentioned, like are there do you have job opportunities where the employer is going to match and consider that when you're trying to decide which job to take and look into like some of that additional retirement planning and things like that
Hmm.
because I think it goes beyond just what you're making in your paycheck. It's also, are they helping you with your investments for the future?
Yep. Hmm.
So I think we kind of have a couple of last questions. Just wanted to kind of wrap up. You know, you mentioned avoiding using credit cards to kind of borrow to make ends meet when it comes to like those you know, the things that you have to take care of each month. What tips do you have? We are going to have an episode about credit cards later, so we don't have to go too far into it. But what tips do you have for managing credit cards responsibly while you're in college?
Well, the first thing is if you don't have a lot of money, I would avoid like having a credit card. It can sometimes feel like that kind of that easy way to kind of get those things that you might need. But the problem is if you don't have extra money next month to pay that bill, then it's just going to be a constant cycle of trying to catch up with your credit cards. Always remember that any debt you acquire today is going to impact your future income. So that's kind of the first place is don't use your credit card as a way to fill in that gap to get through the month because it's just going to create more debt for you and create more issues for you down the road. If you are in a place where you want to, you can manage the debt credit card payments, then always remember as you're using it to have a plan for how you're paying it off. So, there's a lot of kind of incentives to use a credit card with points and some travel and different things like that. Don't let that kind of stuff get you sucked into choosing a credit card because sometimes in the end those incentives really don't pay off maybe for the use of the card. If you do use the card, always make sure you have a plan for paying it off before you swipe. So if I'm going, I'm doing my Christmas shopping and I'm using my credit card mainly out of ease of shopping, it's easier to make returns when you have a use a credit card. It's there's just some benefits to that use of the credit card rather than a debit card, but know that you're going to have that money to be able to pay it off next month or swipe it, pay it off, that type of a thing right at the time. So kind of, yeah, my two tips are avoid credit cards if you really don't have much money to be able to manage it. And then always remember that borrowing money today it obligates that future income.
Awesome. So to wrap up, I just wanted to ask, what's one piece of financial advice that you wish someone had told you when you were in college?
I wish someone had encouraged me to either take a financial class or a workshop or a program that was offered on campus or to really just to sit down and talk to somebody about my finances. As a college student, I had no idea how to budget. I didn't have really any guidance on, kind of the best way to manage my finances, and it definitely didn't talk about it with my friends. So that probably is the thing is if there is a some kind of a class on campus, listening to this podcast, um, any kind of a program, talking with somebody about your finances. As I already mentioned, there's accredited financial counselors, uh, different people on campus who can sit down and work with you on that. um, I think that's the best thing is even if you think you have it figured out, just to sit down with somebody and just do a check. Like, am I all right on track with this?
I think that's really great. Um, any last resources that you want to plug or anything that you want to recommend for helping folks kind of build those? I know you just barely did, but any other like additional resources you wanted to add?
So as I mentioned already, I work for SDSU Extension. We do have our website, extension.sdstate.edu. I have a personal finance page that has articles, and it also lists the different programs that we offer. Most of our programs are free as they're offered through SDSU Extension. And so college students are very welcome to go to that page. You'll find the personal finance page underneath the wellness tablets or tab. So lots of good information there, and it's always being updated and making sure it's relevant for you.
Well, Lorna, thank you so much. I think this was really informative and a wonderful way to kick off our month of financial wellness. So I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks, Caitlin. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of State of Wellbeing, a podcast from South Dakota State University. This podcast is brought to you by the Mental Wellbeing Team and SD State Health.